loving me, I loving you. Mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, sisters and brothers, friends for life, won't live in the past. All I wanna do now is making it last.
What is positive parenting and how can it be applied? I'm going to be speaking with Jurchenko, and I'm hoping I pronounced that properly. Welcome to Making It Last podcast. I'm your host, Noreen Daly, and it is nice that I'm getting, because I am grateful for COVID, and I'll tell you why. Because of COVID, I am being introduced to people scattered all over in the US. And maybe if not for COVID, that would not have happened. And Jed is one such person that I found through a site. He is a marriage and family therapist. In his words, husband to an amazing wife. He's coach, and he's one of the books that he's an author for, because he has 20 odd books out, 131 Creative Conversations for Couples. And not just the title alone is intriguing for me. Welcome, Jed.
Doreen, thank you for having me on the show. And I love that. I love that you're thankful for COVID with all the chaos and craziness that it's caused. You know, we're finding reasons as a family to be thankful and grateful too. And actually kind of cool, some of the stuff that's happened in the midst of all the hard stuff.
Yes, that's true.
So it's an honor to be here, honor to be connected with you, and getting to be on this podcast is one of those cool things.
All right. So the whole idea of positive parenting, what is that?
Yeah, so positive parenting, really the way I like to think about it is it's just simply the opposite of negative parenting. And that seems obvious, but parenting has changed so much over the years. You know, here in the United States, it wasn't that long ago. In fact, when my mom was growing up, she'd tell me stories of being in Catholic school and keeping her eyes directed at the front and just afraid to make any mistake, or she would get swatted on the hand with a ruler. And so I would describe that as almost negative parenting, going towards things that are punitive, discipline that hurts, that has a negative tone to it first. And so positive parenting is really this mindset shift of, hey, I'm going to try relationship building first. I'm going to try redirecting, guiding, helping my child learn the way that he needs to go in a positive way first. And so I don't see it as an either or, but more of a mindset shift of we're going to try the positive first. Does that make sense?
It does, but there might be somebody who's listening and they're thinking, but what you just described is what my parents did and it worked for me. So why then is it being deemed as being negative? If in my mind, I think it worked and I quote unquote turned out okay.
Absolutely. And so as psychology is progressing further and faster, we're learning that positivity really matters. And I'll give you a couple different examples. So I grew up in San Diego, where there's SeaWorld, and of course they keep those giant killer whales. And they did studies on how do you train a killer whale? Well, you do it with positive reinforcement. You catch that whale doing things right, you cheer it on, you offer praise. And then this leadership coach by the name of Ken Blanchard went and wrote this book called Whale Done. And it was all for teams saying, man, when your team is going in the wrong direction, instead of cracking down on them harder, find things that are going right and cheer them on. And what we learned is, you know, when it comes to animals, when it comes to whales, if you reward that positive behavior, they're actually going to learn faster than if you punish them for negative behavior. I think when it came to orcas or killer whales, as they're often called, you're not going to use that negative punishment. Because, man, who wants to punish a whale and then jump in the water with them when they've got all those sharp teeth, right?
True.
You're going to keep things positive, friendly, and engaged. And interestingly enough, you know, there comes a point with our kids where, man, they're going to grow up, and for a lot of parents, they're going to outgrow us. And I'll never forget talking to a coworker one day, in the field of psychology, teaching other parents. And this was a short mom, probably a little bit over 5 feet tall.
Mm-hmm.
And she had 2 high school boys who, man, they were basketball players. They were 6'2", 6'3". They towered over her.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, Jed, here's the good thing. I've got such a strong relationship with my boys that if I ever needed to, if they ever really blew it, I could bring them to tears with just the words. I could just say, man, I'm so disappointed in you right now. And the tears would start flowing because we have that kind of relationship. And that's what positive parenting is all about, is it's putting that relationship first. Because, just like killer whales, it's an odd example, but our kids are going to outgrow us one day. We want that relationship. For moms, single moms, to be able to say, hey, that really hurt me. And know that, man, that's going to be enough that's going to steer your kids in the right direction, because maybe they don't mind messing up. Maybe they don't mind breaking the rules, but they don't want to hurt that relationship with mom. Man, that's powerful. Does that kind of make sense?
It does, but, somebody might listen and they will say, with children and regardless of the age, in their minds, they're saying, I must make sure that there's this distinction, or there's this, I don't want to say barrier, because barrier might give a negative connotation, but there's some people who think that if it is that they make an effort to have a relationship with their child, that in some way the boundaries might get crossed.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying with the boundaries, and we don't want to cross those boundaries. And I would say it's taking a different view of a relationship.
Okay.
It's having a positive parent-child relationship, not a peer-peer relationship where you're both equal.
Right.
But one where you're first and foremost your child's biggest cheerleader. And you're doing some discipline, you're doing some correction, and you're experimenting to see what works with your child. To be honest, no 2 children are exactly alike.
Mm-hmm.
So there's not a positive parenting formula. Psychology doesn't have any tips or tricks where we can say, man, discipline in this way, and your child will, follow the rules, follow the directions 100% of the time. It really is that ongoing process of experimentation and learning, I would say, for both of you.
I know you've been enjoying the conversation, but we're going to take a little break and get a word from our sponsor. So, the whole idea of a branding strategy sounded so exotic and so fancy to me. But after having several conversations with Neon, I now have a clearer understanding. I am sure of what my identity is, what it is that I want people to see Noreen Daly as. Thanks, Neon. Thanks, Splint. Visit them at wearesplint.com. If it is that somebody's listening specifically for some tips, what would those tips be in terms of how to apply this whole idea of positive parenting? Because for a lot of people, this is a relatively new concept.
I'm glad you asked that. And so I would say the place to start is with that relationship. And one piece of advice that I love to pass on is this whole idea, which I didn't think of this myself. I've heard it said many times. It's the idea that rules without relationship can lead to rebellion. And so it's starting with that relationship first and then building on that. And so something I encourage parents to do is to build connection moments with their kids just throughout the day. So it's finding habits and routines that are simple and connecting and fun and build that positive relationship. For our family, it starts in the morning when we all have breakfast together. And especially during COVID, we just all share 3 things that we're thankful for. That's this whole idea of getting to know what's going on in our kids' day. But then also, my wife Jenny and I, we want to instill gratitude into our kids. That's one of our family values. And we want our kids to know, hey, even in the midst of COVID, we're going to find stuff that we're thankful for. Because there's always something to be thankful for. You just have to look hard enough to find it.
True.
And so really, this is laying the foundation for honest conversation, open communication, and connection.
I love the whole idea of connection moments, though. I'm making a notation of it because a lot of people describe it differently. But if you make a deliberate attempt and if you're intentional about it, it can happen in spite of all the craziness that's happening around us.
Absolutely. So another positive parenting tip that I love is just authenticity. And my wife Jenny and I, we did a Thriving at Home Summit just a couple months ago. Mm-hmm. We interviewed a couple experts on kids and parenting, and it was fun to watch this theme of authenticity come up over and over again. And so all of these experts would say, man, when I tell stories to my kids from my childhood, stories where I was a hero and did really good, but also stories where I blew it and messed up and failed. Man, that's huge. Mm-hmm. And I thought back to my own childhood, times where I disobeyed my parents and stuck my finger in the light socket and got zapped. Yeah, and I tell my kids, man, I found out that that's when disobedience, it can hurt. And of course, they laugh at the story, and I get all dramatic when I talk about plugging myself in to see what would happen and how I got all sneaky about it. But there's this, wow, Daddy disobeyed Grandma. He didn't follow the rules. And it starts to create some openness and honesty and connection. I think some understanding, too, about why the rules are there. Because I want my kids to know, I'm not making up these rules to ruin their lives, and I'm not making them up just to be me. And there's a reason for them. And in this case, we don't stick our finger in the power socket at home because I don't want you to get hurt.
I know you've been enjoying the conversation, but we're going to take a little break and get a word from our sponsor.
Are you struggling to become an effective communicator? Let Noreen Daly, the communications specialist, get you there. Services include communications consultancy, one-on-one coaching, public speaking and debate training, leadership and team building sessions, plus much more. Visit noreendaly.com for more info. Noreen Daly, redefining the way you communicate.
As we're wrapping up, though, Jed, if it is that with all that you've said, somebody's still somewhat cynical and saying it's all well and good for you to say that, Jed, because maybe it is that because of how you've been socialized, it's easy for you to have such a relationship or exhibit positive parenting. What would be your response to somebody who's still cynical and skeptical about this whole idea of positive parenting?
My response would be, take it for a test drive. Make it your experiment. We don't have to make it a kind of one and done thing. Probably you're not going to make this big switch from discipline and timeout and whatever form of discipline you're using right now to 100% positive. And probably that's not going to be healthy or effective. So start building that relationship in tiny doses first. Start having more conversations with your kid. Maybe even share a story of a time you broke the rules. And then talk about some of the reasons that the rules are there. And experience that connection moment. See how that feels. Try it on for size and then go from there.
Excellent note to end on. Thank you so much, Jed.
Thank you for having me on the show. It's been an honor.
This was Make It Last podcast. I'm your host, Noreen Daly. It's all about helping us to have better relationships, not just with ourselves, but with other people. Until next time.
Making it last is all I care to do. You loving me, I loving you. Mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, sisters and brothers, friends for life, won't live in the past. All I wanna do now is making it last.